Hello, I'm Robin and welcome to Powered Modular. Now this is a video that's been in the works for a couple of years. Back in the COVID lockdowns, I looked seriously into trying to make my modular mobile. I wanted to take it out. I wanted to put it in a bag, take it out to a field, to a forest, to a beach. I wanted to sit there and make beautiful music. I knew I could do it, it had to be possible, but how? How do you make it possible? I mean, evidently a battery is the way forward, some kind of power bank. But what power bank? I would have lots of conversations with really bright, intelligent, helpful people who would talk about wattage and voltages and ampage, power, time-space interface, that kind of thing, which was helpful, but never actually was able to ever dig down to an actual product. What is the thing that you buy to make it work? That was the problem. And it's taken me a long time to finally get there. And I still don't actually know the answer. So what I should caveat this entire video with in the first place is that this is not the solution. Well, it might be the solution. It may be the solution. It's become my solution. But what I mean is that I'm not going to... I'm not Ben Jordan. I'm not an intelligent scientific guy necessarily on that sort of level. I can't bring you the answers and the maths which is going to make it all work so that you can make an intelligent choice and an intelligent decision. No. All I can do is show you what I did. Because I came to the point where I really wanted to do this. I wanted to do it all summer, and I kept putting it off because I could not find the answer to the question of what product to buy, what battery, what power bank to buy to enable me to take this outside. I couldn't answer that question. So in the end, I just had to give it a go. I mean, this is just sometimes how I feel I have to operate. I mean, it's at the danger or the risk of making myself look stupid and unintelligent and reckless, perhaps. But without those qualities, I never would have gotten to Eurorack in the first place. I never would have started doing DIY. I never would have decided on a case and a power supply, and I never would have started making videos about it because I did all of that without having the real answers, because they were so difficult to grasp, so difficult to gather. And so there came a point when you just had to move forward. You just had to do something. And so this is what I've done here. So in my roundabout rambling sort of way, what I'm trying to say is that I am going to show you what I've done. And hopefully that will be of use to you. I cannot guarantee that your system will work in the same way, or that it will be as hard or as easy or as straightforward. I don't know. And I'm sorry about that. I'd love to be able to make a fully reasoned mathematical scientific video about this. Maybe you can. I'm sure in the comments people will delight in giving me all of that information that I'm supposed to have in order to do this properly. And that would be great. I'm happy to learn. But honestly, in the numerous people that I've talked to about this, all of the theory gets you so far. But no one, not a single person has been able to point to a product and say, oh yeah, you just want that, mate. So I'm going to do that bit, all right? You just want this, mate. This is what you want. This is what you want. So what did I do? Well, first of all, how are we going to do this? Well, let me think. Well, first of all, I need to give you all the numbers that I can. I mean, that's a good place to start, because the numbers are useful and do make sense and will probably help us. And in doing so, it will highlight perhaps where the holes are. And maybe there'll be someone who can fill those in. I'd be very, very grateful if that's the case. So let's start with that. So the premise is, here's the premise. I have a case of modular, this one here, just this one. When I started off this, I was trying to do it with my dual rack brute case, which was more difficult. So I just want to do it with this one, and that actually simplifies it a great deal. The reason being is that the power supply that comes off this, the thing that I need to power it, is a laptop style power supply. Yeah. So that already is making the idea of powering it with a battery much simpler. Why? Because there tends to be two types of power bank out there. So, I mean, if you're looking for a battery, you're not really looking for a phone charger type battery. You're looking for a laptop charging type battery. But if you have a Eurorack case that has an internal power supply that just has a 13 amp plug that comes out the end, then you're going to need something else. You're going to need an AC power bank. Now, if you go on Amazon or other such places, you'll find these big leisure battery type, big chunky power things. I'll try to throw some up on the screen while I'm speaking. These big chunky ones, and they've got a 3-pin plug that you can plug in, and then that will then run your stuff, because it has to generate 240 odd volts to run your gear, and you'd have to plug it into that. Then your internal power supply steps it down to the 12 volts, 5 volts you need for your Eurorack. So that's one way of doing it if you have an internal power supply. But in my brain, that's like, well, I'm having to generate, I'm having to up to a whole load of voltage in order to then step down to a whole load more voltage in order to get it right. Why don't I cut that bit out, and then I wouldn't have to have such a powerful battery? At least that's my thinking. So the way that I was going to do it was to use sort of power supply, modules that then go to a laptop power supply. That was my thinking. And so that way, all I would need would be a power bank that can supply 12 volts. Then I can take that, plug that into my Eurorack, and everything should work. It should just work. It will work, won't it? Of course it will. Because all of this makes complete sense. So that's what I was going for. So when the Bafako case turned up, I was delighted to find that it did not have an internal power supply. I mean, there's a massive lot of internal bus boards and business going on in here. But ultimately, the power supply is a power brick. And that simplifies it enormously. Because all I need to do in a battery is replicate this here, and the thing should run. Yeah? Simple. Yeah. Simple. It just started raining. That's nice. And so that enabled me to narrow my search down. Okay. So I now know that all I need is a DC supply. A DC supply. So it's a cable that ends up in this, not a 3-pin plug, just this, coming from this, but this being a battery. Yeah? That's what I'm after. Okay. So in that case, I need to know, or at least I felt I need to know, some numbers. This is where it all goes horribly wrong, of course. But hey, let's try to hold on to this idea of needing numbers. So first of all, people kept saying to me, wisely, and that's exactly what we should be doing, is we need to find out what's the draw of this. And that means how much current is it using? How many amps does it need to run? Now you can find that out through the magical website of modulargrid.net. It's a fantastic place where you can put up your modular, and it will tell you all sorts of things about it, like how much it costs, which is not a good thing to look at. So here's mine right here. This is mirroring this exactly. This is the system I've been testing in order to get all this to work. And so here it is realized in Modular Grid. And it will tell me a few things. The most important thing being down here is the power consumption. Power consumption is 1662 milliamps, or 1.6 amps. I'm pretty sure you can say. That's at plus 12 volts. There's also other things like 842 milliamps at minus 12, 2 milliamps at 5. I don't really know why there's addition. I don't need at this point to understand all of the figures. I'm just relating them. So I can take away from this that I need a battery that can supply at least 1.662 amps. That, you would think, would be a very, very useful piece of information. Okay, what other information do I have? Well, on the back of this thing here, it tells me how many volts I need on the power supply. And it says DC in 9 to 36 volts, which is odd, but that's what it says. And it also says a minimum of 130 watts. So that was interesting. That feels like other information which is going to be helpful in finding a battery. So if I look at the supply here, this says 152 watts, 24 volts. So it sounds like the Bafako case in particular is very versatile in the range of voltages and stuff that it can handle, but it is also quite a heavy duty power brick. So 130 watts, 9 to 36 volts, 1.6 amps. Those are the numbers which you would have thought you could put into something and it would churn out what you need. And maybe it does. Maybe it does. But before we go in search of that, there's one other figure we can take, and we can measure the actual ampage, the actual draw of this, because I've got it running through a smart plug which tells me how much power it's using. Now if I go to that, what it tells me is it's using 158 milliamps. At least I think it's milliamps. It's not entirely clear, but that's my assumption from what I can see, because that seems to be the case. I'm making this up, obviously. But it says 158 milliamps, which is nowhere near the 1.6 amps that Modular Grid says it needs. So what do I do with that information? I don't know. So, with all of these bits of information, let's plug that into Amazon and see whether we can find a power bank that will do that. So if you look at all of the power banks out there, I mean, they're not designed for this. They're designed for laptop charging, phone charging, that kind of thing. Laptop charging is what you want to be looking for, I would say, because that's going to be more powerful than just charging a phone. This ain't no phone. But you're not going to need to go into leisure batteries, because those are going to be the ones that have AC charging on them for your larger plug-in fridges and other bits and pieces. So looking at these products, this is the one I ended up on. And it's called the Crestonia Laptop Power Bank 25,000 milliamp hours, portable charger, blah, 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 DC, this, that and the other. So what I wanted was something that had a DC output, so I could plug it directly into here, and something which would provide enough power to run it. However, the only numbers that this gives you is 25,000 milliamp hours. It doesn't really tell you anything else, and this is the same for all of them. When you dig down into, is there anything in here that suggests it has anything? No. It says it's 19 volt 2 amp charging in. So the 2 amps, I thought, well, maybe that's an indication of something. And it can be recharged in 3.5 hours, but it doesn't really say what it's giving out. You go through all the information. DC out, quick charging, yeah. Powerful input. I mean, what's the input got to do with anything? Okay, if you look at what it says for the outputs, it says on the USB outputs it goes up to 12 volts, and on the DC output it goes up to 20 volts. Now we needed 9 to 36, so 20 volts sounds great. 9 volts sounds all right. 12 volts also sounds good. So this is sounding all right at the moment. Now I've got it here, low shutdown current and high shutdown current, which I don't know what that means. But the high shutdown current for the DC output is greater than 3 amps or greater than 4.7 amps. So I think what it's trying to say is that it will shut down if the ampage gets to be greater than 3 amps at 12 volts or 4.7 amps at 16 to 20 volts. So again, my 1.6 amps should be well within that. So that should not be a problem. So that's a useful thing to understand. It's still not telling you what the ampage out is. Is that important? Maybe I'm banging on about that and it's a completely irrelevant question. I don't know. Down here it tells me that the DC output can support 5 volts, 8.4 volts, 9 volts, 12 volts, 16 and 20 volts. So again, a good range, and that should fit nicely with this case. So the only other figure I've got here is the 25,000 milliamp hours. Now that is 25 amp hours, and My research on the internet tells me that that means that this power bank will be able to run 1 amp for 25 hours. So if I've got 1.6 amps, then I'll be looking at, what, 15, 17 hours? Something like that. Does that seem feasible? No, not in the slightest. But that's the idea, I think. So, putting together all of this jumble of information that doesn't quite add up, doesn't quite match, doesn't really give me the comforting things that I need to know, but I do know that it can kick out enough voltage that this will accept. I know that its upper limit, this is well within its upper current limit, and that it's a good size and looks nice. All of those things together made me think, heck, it's 100 quid, flipping go for it. I mean, there's no way that I'm going to be able to confirm with anybody that this is going to be able to run this. I don't have the figures. I don't have the knowledge or the know-how to know whether that's the case. And so ultimately, which is, I say, what I have to do sometimes, I just take a stab in the dark and see how it goes. So that's what I did. And I ran a couple of tests and I took it out, and here's what happened. So I've taken off to the woods to see if I can test out my first modular in the woods session. Not entirely sure how this is going to pan out, but I have a battery, I have a modular, I have some bits and pieces and recording equipment, and I have some woods, strange woods. My village has about 1,000 dogs in it for about 200 people, and they are constantly being walked all over the place, so the likelihood is that I'm going to run into a whole bunch of dog walkers at one point or another, which really fills me with joy, not because of the dogs, but because of my ability to talk to camera, my ability to relax into the idea of what I'm doing is desperately hampered by passers-by and that massive feeling of embarrassment. But if the idea is to take modular out into the world and to use the environment in order to play and interpret and to inspire yourself, then heck, you've got to do it. You've got to put those feelings of ridiculousness aside and sit there and see what you can do. It's going to be interesting, that's for sure. Now, of course, what I should have done is got into this right at the beginning of the summer, as opposed to at the beginning of the winter, because it's going to be flipping freezing, I imagine. Well, I'm already feeling cold. And also the sunlight is not perhaps as sunny as one would like, but you've just got to go with what you've got. Besides, I'm feeling that the iciness of the air is hopefully going to contribute. And also, I'd love this to be a quiet, in the middle of nowhere kind of thing, but it's not. There's noises. The countryside is full of mechanical noises, whether it's tractors, aircraft, helicopters, people mowing the lawns, cutting things down, moving stuff about. It's a constant cacophony of noise. But what I think is down this end of the woods is a picnic table. Just a lone picnic table scattered into the space. And that's going to be my focus. In fact, I can see it. I'm going to try and set up there, which of course is right in the path of everything and everyone. But maybe I'll get half an hour all by myself. Maybe I will. But let's see. This space has been really looked after. It went into a bit of a decline a few years ago, but the villagers sort of got together and really sorted it out. And that's a brilliant thing, because it's really nice down here now. There's a pond, or almost you could call it a lake, and some brilliant space. This is almost a space you could kick a ball in, which is something that our village sorely lacks. So it's a little bit on the beaten track, isn't it? But it's a stable platform, and heck, it might be interesting to people coming through. So here's another attempt at some kind of mobile modular shenanigans. This time to the beach, which is where I intend to do quite a lot. Now sadly, the car park was on the full side So, not entirely sure how busy it's going to be down here, which could hamper my my casual confidence with talking to microphone and such like. But hey, I'm going to be brave. I'm going to set up, going to listen to the water, going to see if everything works, and do some music. That's ultimately the plan. Now, I thought about this a little bit. I could potentially set up on the dune edge here and do it. But that's not very brave, is it? But then am I going to get run over by dogs or little children? I don't know. I do not know. I could just go a bit further and just go for it. I think that's the plan. See, I think that windbreak over there, that groin, is probably the sweet spot. That's not, I would say people would see that and not go too much further then. At least I'm further away from those kids anyway. Yeah, I'll be fine. I think the tide's coming in, but it's not going to be high tide till 3. So that should give me, I should have half an hour in here without any bother. Before it gets too close or cuts me off from behind. So here it is. Here, isn't it sweet? Isn't it gorgeous? Isn't it the sort of thing you think, yeah, that would be fantastic if that works? Because look how small it is. It can easily fit into my bag. No bother. An easy solution. It must work. It has to work. It should work. Shouldn't it? Well, we know that it sort of does. So let me tell you how that went. So the first time I plugged it in, I set it to 9 volts. You set it on the front here. It's got a very over bright display, and it came up and you hit it a couple of times. 9 volts seemed to make sense because I just assumed this was 9 volts into there. So I put 9 volts in, plugged it in to the rack of stuff. I had slightly different configuration at that time. I had lots of digital modules particularly in there. Plugged it in and it sort of went whoop, and then went oof, and then whoop, and then oof, and then ooh, lots of woman and oofing. And I sort of fiddled around a bit, took out a few modules. The Trinity in particular, Modbat Trinity, really didn't like it and would keep rebooting all the time. So it wasn't quite gathering or pulling in as much energy as I hoped that it would. So I ummed and ahed about it. I took out various modules and it seemed to be a lot more stable just using analog stuff, and I got some things to work. But then another time when I turned it on, it would do it again and start rebooting itself, and it just wasn't happy. I then reached out to Manu at Bafaco just to say, hey, you got any advice on running your case? Any tips on getting it to run? And he says, well, stick the volts up. Give it as many volts as you can. He doesn't mean as many volts as you can, up to within what it is it can handle. And so I went, oh, right, okay. So I then stuck it up to all the way up, 12, 16, 20. Put up to 20 volts. 20 volts, eh? So at 20 volts, flipping worked. So I plugged the cable in there, just in the front. It's just got a cable. It comes with a whole load of adapters to get the right size cable. Plug that in. Turn it on. And it just works. Flipping great it is. Flipping great. So 20 volts. That seems to be the key. Completely stable as far as I can say. However, it's not been completely glitch free. There's been the odd problem. For instance, when I was out at the beach doing that lovely bit of stuff there, it was not really working. I mean, the reason why I only ended up with 5 minutes of usable music is because the other 20 minutes I was fighting with the system. It just wasn't quite working right. And it turned out to be the White Rabbit module was just kind of pulsing. I don't know exactly why or what was going on with that, but it was just kept sort of cutting out. And once I unpatched that, and in the end I think I pulled it out, the system worked beautifully. So what I'm saying is that it's not necessarily a perfect solution. It's something you have to play by ear, and perhaps when you're out there in the middle of nowhere doing your thing, then you're just going to have to patch around it and cope with it and see what goes on. So, just to underline the fact that I have had the odd problem. But the one I did in the woods, completely fine. Not a problem with any of that at all. So, it may vary. Is this the perfect solution? Maybe, maybe not. Don't know. Maybe it's just something you're going to have to kind of run with. So, the next question is, how long? How long do you get on this battery? Because when I was in the woods and at the beach, environmental forces actually caused me to pack up rather than the battery itself. And each time I was playing for about half an hour or so and it was completely fine and the battery was not drained. So how long does it give you in total? I mean, obviously I'm running, as I say, 1.5 amps, so I should get 17 hours, right? Or thereabouts. Yeah. Here's how much you get. I mean, that feels about right, doesn't it? An hour off a power bank, you know, that sounds right. It sounds ridiculous to think that you might get hours and hours and hours and charge off it. I mean, maybe if you were charging your phone, yes. But running something like this, no. So this whole 25,000 milliamp hours business is really not applying to us. But I guess the higher the number of that, simply the more powerful the power bank is. I mean, there's a 50,000 one, which undoubtedly would power it for longer. I'm assuming it's going to be thicker and heavier, but it will power it for longer. But for me, to get an hour, I mean, I'm unlikely to sit in a spot, you know, in the woods for an hour just playing music. That seems to be a lot of time, and I think I would be overcome with self-consciousness before that sort of time elapsed. So an hour is plenty. To take it out, sit on the beach for an hour, perfect. Sit in a field for an hour, perfect. Take it out, even do a gig on battery. No bother at all. So that is great. That is great. So bringing this all together then to some kind of conclusion, what I can conclude is that this worked. I'm so pleased. So pleased. I'm still baffled by why it works or why it doesn't work or what the numbers mean or why this or why that. You know, all of these things are probably understandable, but they're not something that I can quite wrap my head around at the moment. And by all means, fill the comments with your solutions and your equations on what it is that one should get, considering all of the numbers and the facts that we know. And also point out the things that I'm obviously missing and misunderstanding, and I'm completely happy to learn in that regard. I may well be defensive in response to your comments because I'm human, not because I claim to actually know anything. But ultimately, the Chrisdonia laptop power bank 25,000 milliamp hours portable charger is the bomb. It's the thing that's working. It does the job. I'm so pleased that I did this. I hope to get out a lot more, you know, on my bike and walking. I mean, why I couldn't have done this in the spring, I don't know. You know, I want to get on my paddleboard, have me modular on my paddleboard, not fall in, and it'll be beautiful. It'll be beautiful. So yeah, I like the idea of exploring my environment and running into, you know, running into nature and the wind and other hazards that could possibly affect making music out in the world. That could be a beautiful thing. I take my recorder with me, this thing, which I'm using to record, which I use to record my voice normally. Great thing about it is it's got stereo twin microphones in the front, and I can run the output of this into it. It's a 4-track recorder, so I can record the environment and record the sound from this at the same time, and then mix those with the video back home. And of course I can use my crazy loopy goofy 360 camera to capture everything, because part of the problem of going outside, and I realized this when I did my video on the Hydrasynth Explorer, is that it's a flipping faff dealing with these things. You know, the cameras and the recorder and this and the headphones and all this, you know, all the stuff is hard work. And so reducing the amount of stuff you have to carry with you is a really good thing. So the simplicity of the Insta360 camera, I can just set it on a tripod and it records. I don't have to worry about focusing. I don't have to worry about setting up a shot. I'm just sitting it down, setting that going, plugging everything into that. Great, set that going. I can potentially power this also from the power supply, because although it does take regular batteries, they run out really fast. And I have some strange thing from that company that does the cables. I've got like a ripcord power supply thing that goes in a battery pack that goes inside, which you then power via USB, and this has a USB port on it. Now I don't imagine that attaching that is going to drain the battery any quicker than it already is. So if I can find that cable, because I've lost it, it's there somewhere, if I could bloody find that cable, then that makes it even more mobile and convenient. So yeah, it's a fantastic thing. I'm so pleased that I did it, and I'm so pleased that it works. I would have tried a few other batteries, I think, before I completely gave up on it, but I'm really pleased to be able to say to you that this battery in particular worked with this modular rig, and it works for about an hour. And that's all right. Your mileage may vary, so please don't blame me if you buy a battery and it doesn't quite work with your thing. You're going to have to experiment as well. You're going to have to check your numbers, check your figures, see if you can work any of that into what the battery is trying to tell you, and try to make a relatively informed decision, if you see what I mean. So there you go. Modular, mobile, on batteries. Fantastic. I'll post more about this as and when I do them. If I get the odd break in the weather, I'll nip out there and I'll make some music. It'll be fantastic. Hope that was helpful. In the meantime, go make some tunes.